Hey, everybody who is listening to me now. This is our traditional Friday live session, this time in English. Thanks for coming, thanks for joining. We are streaming on two platforms as usual, YouTube and VK. You ask me questions in English, I try to answer them in English as well. It is preferred that if you ask me about software development, maybe object-oriented programming, software design, management of software teams, software engineering in general, maybe career development questions, which you so much love to ask, and maybe questions about life, the philosophy of programming, and philosophy of us programmers. I'm myself a software developer. I can probably try to help you. Let's start with the questions. I will try to read the questions which make most sense, because usually there are more questions than the time we have. That's why we have to be careful and answer only the questions that we want to answer. The first question. What are the plans for the next year? I have big plans for the next year. I am planning to make a stable and practical release of the programming language which we develop, which is called EOLang. You can find it on eolang.org. Right now we have an experimental version which does work, but it has so many unimplemented features, it has so many bugs still that we cannot call it a stable version, even though we're in active development. And I invite most of you or all of you to join this development where we need programmers, we need Java developers and JavaScript developers. These are two languages which we use to develop the compiler and the toolkit around our programming language. If you know Java, if you know JavaScript, you can help us. And this is an open source development. If you join the team, you have a chance to become a member of a product, or the contributor, the key contributor to the project, to the product, which potentially may make a big difference. That's the number one plan for the next year. Next one. Have you ever experienced burnout? Can a few months of rest help to recover? Yes, I do sometimes experience some sort of a burnout, or I just feel tired and I kind of lose motivation a little bit for maybe one day or two, but it doesn't take months, as you're saying. It's usually just a few days, and just no work helps. That's all I need. But then it's always, I believe, the burnout or the feeling of tiresome is coming usually from the absence of the objective and accurate feedback on your contribution, on your work. This is what, in my case, it's coming from. When you do something and you're not getting back the right information about what you've done, when nobody is properly criticizing you or properly valuing your contribution. This is what leads to burnout. Just find the customer, find the user, find the person who needs what you do. It is not necessarily your boss. It is not necessarily your client who gives you the money. It is not necessarily your partners who sit next to you. It may be a reader from your blog, for example. It can be a reviewer of your potential paper, which you're going to send to some magazine, to some journal. It can be anyone, but somebody has to give you the feedback. Without the feedback, you burn out. Next one. Does it ever happen that you were doing nothing or doing bullshit job? No, I can't remember that something like that happened, because I kind of love to do something all the time. What happened to me many times is that I was doing something that was not important for other people. something that was not interesting for other people, something which was not paid for. It happened to me a lot in this life. Like a lot of the software which I wrote in my career is not used by anyone. It's just software which is used by myself sometimes, and even I don't use it. That happened many times, and I would call that, like you say, bullshit job, because it was done for nothing. But I got some fun from that, and I spent time doing that, and that was my lifetime. I enjoy that. But doing something which was not enjoyable never happened to me. I'm trying to stay away from that kind of activity. When I have to do it and I don't like it and I don't enjoy it, then no, probably not. Even though I understand that many people do that kind of job, but I recommend you not to. I recommend you to, in any job, in any activity which you are assigned to, first of all, find fun. Find the source of pleasure. Understand what's interesting there. Why do you love this job? Even if it's routine, even if you see that there is no creativity involved, that you see that there is no no art, nothing novel there. You're not creating anything new. You're just repeating the same operations over and over again. Still, try to find something that will amuse you, that will entertain you, that will make it fun. And only after that you do that. Before you find fun, you don't even start, because that will be a waste of your lifetime. Even if they force you to do that, somebody, even if you have to do it because you need money, still try to find why it's interesting, why it's fun. Why do you waste your time, which is the only resource you have in possession? Why do you spend it there? What are you getting back? And there has to be something that you are getting back, you personally. Be sort of egoistic in this way. Just work for yourself. That's what I'm trying to say always. Work for yourself. Don't work for your boss. Don't work for the company. Don't work for the government. Don't work for your friends. Don't work for the money. Don't work for your family. Work for yourself. Make sure that you are getting as much as you can from this activity. And if you do, and if you have high moral standards, then you will contribute to the group which you belong to at the most possible way. Next question. I was offered a job as a working student in Bosch. They don't need me for long. Should I go and try or stay in my small firm and work more? I will lose money actually, but Bosch. Well, in general, it's better to work for a large company. I keep saying that over and over again. If you are offered a job in a company which is big, don't turn it down, because you will gain a lot in this case, especially if you are a student. You will gain a line in your resume, which is irreplaceable. You're gonna go around with this line for decades. In 20 years, this line will still pay off. You will still be able to say in 20 years that, I worked for Bosch. Even at that time, Bosch will not be a company anymore. It happens. Large companies, they get acquired, they get destroyed, it happens. But you will have the CV which speaks for itself. It's something that it's something that you cannot buy. It's something that you cannot get anywhere else. Work for big companies. Unfortunately, this is, I mean, that's an unfortunate situation. I'm not saying that big companies are great places to work, because the majority of time you're gonna waste there. Them large companies, they are super ineffective in the way they develop software. They're super ineffective in how they manage people. They're super boring to work at. They have very inefficient and irrational sometimes, very often, mechanisms of management, and the way they control everything, the way they distribute resources, the way they treat people. All of that will be super unfair, very often, very unfair, it will be very frustrating for you. But that's going to be the experience which you're going to get, which you cannot get anywhere else. It's going to be experience, that's one thing, and second, it's going to be the line in your CV. These two things you definitely need as a student. Next question. What is your current long-running target problem, if it's not a secret? The problem. Well, what I'm doing right now is that I'm trying to to create a programming language. That's the practical problem at hand, which I'm solving for the last, well, practically 4 years. The last 4 years I've spent on this particular problem. And I still don't know how to do that. I'm still not sure what is the right way to implement such a product. Whether it's going to work or it's not going to work. It's still experimental. It's still unstable. It's still full of bugs. It's still missing a lot of features. But it has an ambition to become something very different and very new. And that's the problem, because the success of this activity is it has not high probability. We can easily lose, and we can easily just throw everything away in maybe a few months, maybe a few years. Well, I hope it's not going to happen, but it may happen. And that's the problem. How to actually, from a vision, which I had, let's say 5 years ago, maybe even 7 years ago, from a vision that there has to be a programming language which is designed in a object-oriented programming language, which is designed with the brilliance in mind, not with the practicality in mind, not with the simplicity for programmers in mind, not with the compliance with the traditional understanding of what programming is in mind. We just decided to throw all of that away and design a language which has one thing in mind: the brilliance, the elegance. It has to be elegant. It has to put pieces together the way we believe is the right way to put them together. And we don't care what programmers think about it. We don't care what they think about our syntax. We don't care about the flexibility, the usability, the ability to quickly design simple systems with that, the compatibility with other programming languages. It's like all of these things are secondary. We just believe that elegance, if it's put at the first place, will eventually give everything else to people automatically somehow. If you make your language elegant, then all of a sudden, all other qualities will show up. That was the bet. This is what is expected. And we are not yet there. We're quite far away from that. But if it works, that is going to be the problem which is solved. Can we do that? Can we actually, can the elegance be the driver of all other qualities of a programming language? That's probably the problem I'm solving. What do you think about the prospects of PHP in the next couple of years? Some people keep asking me about PHP all over and over again. I don't know. I still know that PHP is like a language which was designed not with the elegance in mind, and it's trying to get some of the features from other programming languages like types, like classes, like objects, which didn't exist in the beginning. It didn't have even objects. Even object-oriented programming was not there at the time when it was born. But the language absorbs a lot of features from the market, getting more and more powerful. But I kind of don't pay attention to that. It's not interesting for me. It's no fun, because I mean, that's just a copy-paste work. People invest time and resources into this language. Instead of creating something new, they're just making something which was born ugly, they're trying to beautify it because they want to please some certain amount of the market. And I don't kind of feel respect for that kind of work. Like, why are you investing time into that? Like, I would ask one of the contributors to PHP, I would ask this question, why are you doing that? I would understand if they are doing that because some systems are written in PHP, like Facebook, for example, and they work not as fast as they could. And then people start to redesign the internal engine of PHP. They create some virtual machines for PHP. They create some fast compilers for PHP, even though it was an interpreted language at the beginning. That I can understand, because this work could be done for any programming language, and these people probably don't even care what kind of language they deal with. They just know that there's a huge amount of code written in the language, and now my job is to make this huge amount of code to work fast. So do I care about the quality of that language? I don't. I'm just a system level programmer, and I'm interested to solve performance problems. These people I can understand, but people who are trying to beautify the language as it is, introducing new features there, releasing new versions, that's just, I think, just waste of time in general, strategically speaking. Next question. I'm 20 years old and a student. Should I work or focus on studying? Well, I suggest you focus on studying if you feel like you enjoy it. Some people just don't enjoy studying, like myself when I was 20 years old. I did not enjoy studying. I did not enjoy the higher education. I did not enjoy math, for example. I did not enjoy the majority of disciplines which I was taught when I was a student, even though I got my diploma. But the majority of things I just didn't like, and I didn't even attend the lectures. I was just doing programming. I was getting a lot of fun from practical work at that time. So I more or less automatically get the diploma. I did what was necessary to do in order to get the diploma. I actually get an excellent mark for the diploma, but I was definitely not a student in my heart. I was practical engineer at that time. And now I feel that was a mistake. But even if I get back in time and I become myself when I was 20 years old, I would still do the same. I would just quit the university and I would be a practical programmer. That's why my advice is to think what you enjoy more. Do you enjoy studying? Then go for studying. But even if you kind of enjoy studying, then I suggest to sort of find the target of this process. Understand what are you doing it for? What's going to be the ultimate result of your studying? It shouldn't be just a number of books that you read or a number of exams that you pass. It should be maybe the PhD badge which you're gonna get, or it should be some position at some company which you're gonna get, or maybe the funding which you're planning to get because you're gonna get the PhD. Then you will go to some investors and claim that now you know how to to do some AI systems because you have the PhD. Something like that. But there has to be a goal. There has to be the ultimate objective of your studying. Without that, you're going to be frustrated in the end. You're not going to love what you do. The studying. Okay, that's a question in English. So sometimes in your speeches you refer to research. And one of the last talks about open source was basically built on them. Now, how do you find those research and how do you track the new ones? I'm pretty ineffective in tracking them, these research things, these research papers which people publish. Even though it's technically not difficult, you can just go to Google Scholar system, and then you find the number of researchers, or you find the number of papers which kind of which are relevant to what you're interested in, and then you follow them. There's a feature there, how you can configure your scope of interest in Google Scholar, and then they start sending you emails every day with the most recently published papers within the scope of interest which you defined. and you can read them. They're not thousands of them coming every day. There are probably going to be a few, one or two every day. You're going to get the email. You can click there, you can read it, just spend a few minutes on that. The more research papers you read, the faster you will be able to do it. Well, now I'm way better in this activity than I was 3 years ago. 3 years ago, it was just a pain for me to open the research paper, 10 pages, there's some formulas inside, there's some tables, figures, it's all crazy, difficult to understand. I spent like hours, 2-3 hours on each paper. Now I spend 5-10 minutes on a paper because I know which places to look at. I know that this part I can completely ignore because it's not important. I know that this particular phrase or this particular paragraph I need to pay attention to because this is where they say what they want to say in the whole paper. And that, how did it happen? Because I just read hundreds of them over the last 3 years, maybe even thousands of them. So now it's becoming fun for me. It's way more fun than it was 3-4 years ago. And the same will happen to you. It's just time. But then you're asking, how do I find these papers when I prepare for example, my lectures? That's also some kind of a skill. You go to Google Scholar, you type in what you're looking for, you find one paper, then you quickly read it, then you see which papers it refers to, you go to the next one. It's a skill. And it was very difficult a few years ago. Now it's getting way faster. And I think this is how presentations and talks about computer science or in general about programming should be structured, based on some sort of research or real research, interesting, valuable research. I was not doing that before, and I feel that I missed a lot. If you look at my talks 5 years ago on YouTube, then I never mentioned anything about science. I was just giving my opinion. I was just saying what I feel. Sometimes I was referring to industry books, just non-fiction books, written by engineers like myself, not scientists. And now, when I look at those speeches, those presentations, then I feel that, I see that they are way weaker than they could be if I would be using more scientifically proven and scientifically collected facts. I recommend most of you, and to myself, pay more attention to science, even though you may not be a scientist. Like in my talk, which is not yet published, about open source. About open source that is published. I have another talk about some other topic, but it's not yet published. There also I mention a lot of research papers. But in this talk about open source, I did mention a number of studies related to different aspects of open source, and it sounds way stronger comparing to what I would do by just explaining my opinion. Next one. What do you think about getting into foreign master study in 4 years? You mean in the geopolitical situation, like whether it's going to be technically possible for you to move from Russia to Europe and study there? My prediction is that it's going to be the situation in the world will be cooled down. Well, I'm not sure about Middle East. I think there the situation will be worse. But the situation in Russia versus Europe and Russia versus America and China versus America. So let's say Russia versus Europe and Russia versus America, I think it will cool down. But China versus America and America versus Middle East, it will heat up. That means that staying in Russia now will give you some sort of a safe place, I think. In the next 4 years, you will have, I believe, less even problems than now for entering this master study in some European university. You're saying the sound is quiet? Let me check. Oops, sorry, how about that? Hello? I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, that's funny. All right, that was. I'm sorry, guys. I was. We spent like I think 5 minutes for you were just looking at me, but didn't have the sound. Anyway, I will then. Where did I stop? At which question did I stop? What was the last? Okay, I was trying to answer the question about Lenin. I gave you an interesting overview of what I believe this guy is, this Lenin guy. But okay, anyway, sorry. I think I lost some of you guys. But anyway, let's jump to the question. On your lectures, you I totally messed you up. That's my fault. Okay, let's start from here. On your lectures, you often motivate students to innovate, to, for example, create metrics to measure software quality. Have anyone suggested original ideas or created something? Yes, indeed. Indeed, on the lectures, I suggest to the students that they can pick up this research question, which I give them, and develop from this research question some tools, some new metrics, some new algorithms, something which will help them to have some fun, more fun in their everyday life. And unfortunately, like you're asking how many of them are actually doing that. I have to admit that not so many of them. Actually, close to none. Not many of them actually come to me and say that you were saying something about that. I'm actually interested. And I'm also asking myself this question: why it's happening? Why students don't do that? I believe this is in general a problem of higher education right now. The universities or the system in general does not give students motivation. It doesn't explain to these young kids why they need to do something like that. What's the point of that? They don't know why they need science. They don't understand why they need to write academic papers and publish them. They don't know why they need to create open source projects. They don't know why they need to even create startups. They don't know why they need to stand out of the crowd. The majority of them want to belong to the crowd and want to do what they were doing before. They want to continue doing what they were doing before. And this is the majority of people think like that. They just enjoy being with the crowd. They enjoy being with the group. Very few people enjoy standing opposite to the group and sort of fighting with the group. Because every time you suggest a new technology, every time you suggest a new product, every time you create a new open source library or something, you are sort of oppose yourself to the crowd. You're saying you didn't have it before. Now I'm going to give it to you and I'm going to prove it to you that you need it. And they say, no, we don't need it. Now I'm going to prove it to you that you need it. Or you start writing academic papers. Everybody will tell you that, no, we already had it before. It's something new. Prove it to us. And you need to fight with them and convince them that what you're doing actually makes sense. And that's the same for everything else. People just don't enjoy that. The majority of them, only a few people, maybe 10%, 20%, actually are, that kind of people who would love to do that. And the system in general should help those 20% to present themselves and to make something new. How exactly? I don't know. They do now sometimes in the universities. They organize some competitions. They organize some hackathons. But it's still very unclear what exactly these young kids get from that if they participate in that. They just get the money and go home. They write code for some company and then they go home. How many people do you know who, for example, solve tasks on code forces? or they on the participate in the ICPC games when there are students. There are few of them. So it's unfortunate, I think. You also asked me the question about Lenin. Do you respect Lenin? I do, actually. I do. But in order to understand Lenin, you should stop listening to communist propaganda. The propaganda which in my opinion, completely reshaped the image of this guy and presented him in the wrong way. In my opinion, and according to the books written about him and written by him, and I read quite a number of books written by Lenin, he was not the leader. He was not Elon Musk of that time. He was not the guy who enjoyed standing on the in front of the crowd and claiming something, even though he's positioned like that. We all know the statues, we all know the pictures, we all know the portraits of Lenin, where he's presented as Elon Musk, as a leader who is pointing to the future and the crowd is following him. He was not like that. He was writer. He was writing books. That was his job. He was mostly writing and thinking. He was a big thinker. He was a big writer. That the revolution was not, he didn't do the revolution even. Trotsky did that. Lenin laid out the foundation for that. He was thinking, what is wrong with the society right now? What is wrong with the organization of people who live on this planet? What's wrong with us and how we can do it better? And he didn't even have the full answer for that. He was trying to find the answer. He was trying to find the right answer for that, but he failed in so many places. I believe he didn't find the answer while he was alive. But then he was completely repictured. His life, his activity, everything, and they made a superhero, the Iron Man, from him, which he wasn't. I respect him for the deepness of his thinking. He was thinking deep into what is traditionally presented to us, and he was brave, very brave, in the way of thinking. He didn't have any limitation. Well, he didn't have any. That was that's pretty strong to say that. But according to the books which he wrote, I see that he was ready to challenge a lot of things which surrounded him. The morality, the philosophy, the traditions, the way of life that people are used to, all of that was nothing to him. He was only looking for the truth. What's the ideal way of living? And who is the enemy of that? And how can we get rid of that enemy? And then the people showed up, the crowd, who said, "Oh, well, that's a good idea. We're gonna build something on top of these ideas." And then they did the revolution, and then they started killing people, and then they started restructuring the society and all that. All these people, they came after him. So I do respect this guy a lot for the thinking. Next one. I'm creating an online system for passing tests, a homework host for my educational institution. Is it worth putting it in open source? Everything you do, you can put in open source. I would suggest putting every product, every software system in open source, everything. I would actually suggest to follow the strategy like OpenAI did. You do everything open source. You open all your code bases. But then if some huge success happens, and if you see that there are for business reasons, you don't want to keep it open anymore, then you close it. But in most cases, it's not going to happen because you're not OpenAI. In most cases, nobody will care about your code bases. Nobody going to copy your code bases. Most of your products and my products and our products, they will fail. Most of the software that you create, nobody will care about. Well, massively. Like, it's not going to be huge success. Maybe a little bit of success, but not mission critical success, where you can say that, hey, they just stole my new operating system which I created, and I lost billions of dollars. It's not going to happen. Not to you, not to me, not to many people who listen to us right now, to me right now. Don't be afraid of that. But the benefits which you will get after putting your code open source are huge. Because you're gonna get visibility, you're gonna get recognition, you're gonna get potential employment for higher salary. You're gonna get many positive things just because opening your repository and continuing developing as you were developing before. Eventually, you will not even remember that your code is open source, like I do. I don't even think about that. I just know that all my code that I write, it's open source, all of it, for the last 10 years. I just don't know how it is to write code that is not open source. It's just impossible for me. Just, I know that it's like, imagine that you are asking me like I don't know, whether is it okay to, I don't know, cover your face and go around with just a little tiny slice for the tiny area in front of your eyes so you can see what's happening. But your face and your body is totally covered, and that's how you walk. And then you ask me, how about you take it off? Did you think about it? But I'm saying, no, I actually didn't have that mask ever. I just walk around and people look at me and people see me, and I'm used to that. That's my traditional way of living. Just, I know that people can see me. I know that people can see my code. Every time I make a commit, every time I write a single line of code, I know that somebody will see that line of code. And actually many people. I have quite a number of followers on GitHub, so I understand that every time I push something to GitHub, like, people see that. That's just normal. You should, I believe, that's my recommendation, live like that, and you'll be fine. Next question, how often a developer need to change the t-shirt? Okay, before we go to the t-shirt question, the previous one was, what do I think about making a startup or developing the product inside the actual company where you work right now? That's an interesting question because it's possible to go both ways, but I would suggest in general to stay with a large company. At least that's what I'm doing. And it feels that this is where the world is getting to. The world will have large companies, and the imperialism, where companies are getting larger and larger and they control more and more resources, that this time is right here already. It's not coming, it's right here. Because of that, it's better to be closer to resources. When you start a new company, a young company, you have very small chance of success. Inside a large company, your chances for success are way higher because the resources are closer to you. For example, I work in a large company right now. For me, if I have a bright idea to get $2 million, it's just a question of a few meetings and maybe 2-3 months time. That's how I can get $2 million. Not on my personal bank account. But when you do the startup, it's not going to be your personal bank account either. If you create a startup, then you will need $2 million to develop your idea. You will go to investors. The investors will give you the money, but not you. They will give the money to your company. And the money will stay on the bank account of the company. And you will have quite normal or low salary. Your salary on the startup will be smaller than my salary in a large company. If I, for example, today decide to go out of the company where I work and start my own company, my startup, then my salary will go down maybe 3-4 times, and then I will potentially get an investor spending 10 times more efforts to get that money. And then I will get these $2 million, and then I will use this money, continue to get the small salary. Pay attention. My salary will keep small. I will spend these $2 million on what? On programmers, on computers, on everything, which I would also spend this money on sitting in a large company. I will spend the entire chunk of money, and then maybe we'll get the result. If I get the result, then my share in this result will be like, I don't know, 60%, 70%, 40%, depends on my deal with the investor. If I do the same in a large company, what's going to be my share? My share is going to be 0, of course, in this idea. But if this idea works and the company makes money out of this idea, then my position in this company will be way higher. My salary will triple, quadruple, and the ultimate income, which I'm going to get, will be potentially maybe even comparable to the income in the startup. Of course, in the startup, I have a chance to make this startup a multi-billion-dollar company. But how many people can do that? That's, I think, it's a case of 1 of 1,000 startups, 1 of maybe 10,000 startups, when they become unicorns, like Uber, like that kind of unicorns, like Facebook, Google, or whatever. Well, that may happen, of course. But that's just gambling. In this, the same, you can win in a lottery. Just buy a lottery ticket, and people win there, and they win millions there. But you don't need to do anything there. You don't need to waste time. You just buy a ticket and wait. The same for becoming Google. My recommendation: stay in the large company. Okay, next question: how often a developer need to change T-shirt? I'm trying to find the second meaning of this question. Developers, they're somehow different from other people, or there's some sort of T-shirt which is special for developers. Anyway, if it's just a joke, then I think every day you just put your T-shirt in the morning, and in the evening you just put it into the washing machine, and then next day you put the next one, the new one. So you don't wear a T-shirt twice. That's just a simple rule. I think for other people that's the same as for developers. Okay, next question. That's sorry about no audio. Okay, let me check the questions on VK. Okay, on VK we have 2 people watching us and no questions. Now you understand the popularity of the platform. I'm a QA engineer. I feel stuck at current position in my stupid company. I live in Moldova with really small market and feel that I need to kick or an advice how to get out from this pit. You need to get out of Moldova and come to Moscow and you'll be fine. Maybe that's the advice you're looking for. Or get a remote position. Actually, it does matter where you stay. It does matter in which market you're located. And if you work for a local company, then your market is local, then of course your money, your position will be as much as the market can offer you. That's no surprise that you don't like it. Try to work remotely. Find a remote position. Next one. What cutting-edge technologies are Huawei and Chinese companies currently working on, without going into the details? The results of which we might see in 5-10 years. What should we pay attention to? Well, I don't have access to some technologies which may be secret, so don't expect me to hide something from you. I'm just have nothing to hide. I don't have access to that. And I can say that in general, Chinese Huawei companies, I think right now, still in the position of sort of followers, unless I don't know something, which is possible. So definitely I have no, like I said, I don't have access to everything. Maybe there is something which I don't know. But according to what I know, we're just following the flow. For example, JetBrains got out of the market, and JetBrains imposed sanctions on China, on Russia. And what do? We create our own IDE. We didn't do it 10 years ago. I mean Huawei. We didn't do it 10 years ago. Sorry, again, this video. This stream today, my friends, is full of surprise. So I was saying, right, about the ID. 10 years ago, we were not developing ID. JetBrains was developing IDE. 10 years ago, we were not making microprocessors. Intel was doing that. 10 years ago, we didn't have cloud computing. Amazon was doing that. Google was doing that. And then the same is true for many other technologies. We're just catching up. And I think it's just unreasonable right now to ask what are the new technologies that you're working on. I think in general, Russian market and Chinese market, the next maybe 5 or 10 years will just be catching up. We'll be just trying to develop what other markets, especially American market and European market, has developed already, in the last 50 years or 100 years. Fortunately or unfortunately, but that's the truth. Did I work with Arab developers in terms of management? Not really. I worked with Indian developers. I worked with Chinese developers, Arab developers. Not sure. I don't think there is a difference, to be honest. I don't really understand people who are saying that Indian developers are terrible to work with, or Russian developers are more difficult than American, European developers, or that Chinese developers create the software of a lower quality than Russian developers. It's just I believe in a simple formula. There are no bad soldiers. There are only bad generals. I think Napoleon said that. There are no bad programmers. There are only bad architects who didn't configure the system so that the system controls how programmers work. And there are no undisciplined programmers. There are only managers who cannot enforce the discipline on them. So if you give me a team of Arab developers and take, my team of Russian developers away from me, we will still develop what I need to develop. Well, it may initially take longer because they will be moving forward slower, of course, because the team which we have now, we are working together for a few years, so we move forward fast. But give me different people and we're still going to move forward, just slower. And eventually we will get up to speed. Do you solve Advent of Code 2024? No, I don't even know what it is. Okay, guys, we have maybe a few more minutes. Did you look at the question on VK? I don't see any questions on VK, to be honest. Maybe let me check again. Do you have any questions there? Oh, there are questions. Sorry about that. They're all in Russian. Okay, I'll translate that because it's in Russian. Okay, that's a story from some guy who is a student, and he's tired of being a student, even though he likes to write code. And then he got employed at the second year of the study. And then he says he hates that university because they give like very boring tasks. And I cannot be disciplined enough, blah, blah, blah. I said it in the beginning of this stream that something similar happened to me. I didn't like to be a student when I was a student. I didn't like those lectures. I was getting C marks very often. Because I did like to write code at that time. And I didn't like to be a student because, exactly like you're saying, because the majority of those lectures, they're boring, and the majority of disciplines, the majority of courses are boring, and there is no correlation between what they teach you and what you actually need in your practical life. And this connection must be built by the university, not by students. The university has to give that to students, but they don't. They don't give it to you. And you have to do it yourself. You have to find why it's important. But my advice is just ignore it. I mean, don't try to be a good student. Maybe it's not a perfect advice, but that's what I would recommend to myself. Even if I go back in time and I become a student again, I would do the same. I would ignore 80% of lectures, 80% of courses. I would just do as minimum as possible to just not get kicked out of the university. Because the majority of teachers are bad and the majority of courses are boring. It's all true. So why wasting your time? But in order to be more motivated and more interested in a study, find a reason for this study. Understand why you're doing that, why you joined the university. And just not to get to the army is not a perfect reason. Find something else. Just imagine yourself after you finish the study, who you're going to become, what it's going to be. Now you are who you are. But who it's going to be, what kind of different person you're going to be in 5 years when you finish the study, or in 3 years, whatever, how much time you spend there. And then imagine that you're going to be, I don't know, richer, you're going to be more successful, you're going to have this and that. Like, build your own goal. Don't follow the goal which is given to you by the university, because it's a lousy goal in most cases. They give you the goal, they give you a wrong goal in most cases. They just want to keep you there, and they don't even know what for. But you have to define yourself. Why do you go there? What's in it for you? Again, work for yourself. Don't work for the university. Don't study because the university says so. Don't study because your parents say so. Do it because you find something interesting in that. For example, pick one subject, one topic, one research direction, one course, and become a super professional in this course. Why? Well, because you want to get a research paper published by the end of the university. And that's going to be a very good paper. So that you get this paper, and using this paper in your CV, claiming that you are one of the recognizable researchers in your domain, you're going to get a good position in the company which you want to get into. That's going to be your personal trajectory, your personal objective. And go for it. But again, don't work for the university. I think that's the summary of my idea. Okay, I see their questions are finished and we are close to the end. Okay, one final question and we're done. I've been watching you for a couple of months and I don't understand, where do you take time for all the activities? The same, just to continue the previous point. When you know what it's for, when you have fun doing what you're doing, you will find time. I try not to work for anyone. I work for myself. And what I'm doing right now, talking to you, I do it because I like it. Not because anyone is telling me to do that. And I write code because I like writing code. Not because anyone is telling me to write code. That's the recipe. Okay, I hope this recipe helps you. I'm very sorry for the troubles in our stream today. I need to do something with my camera, with the microphone. I need to be careful more. My fault, guys. Thanks for coming. Appreciate. I'm glad to see most of you who are here today. See you next week. It's going to be Friday. I will definitely be with you next Friday in Russian. And I'm sure my microphone and my camera will be all right. Bye-bye.